12th, 2026 to our budget meeting, the first of the 2026 year, and the beginning of the budget season, which we all love. But this is a little bit of a lull, this meeting. We're gonna focus on a few other things because we're waiting. It's not a lull, but we're not gonna focus on the specifics of the budget because we're waiting for Governor Hochul to have her presentation tomorrow, potentially, to give us a preview. And also the 20th to release those state aid runs, which you know is one of my favorite times of the year. So I have a very sad life, but that's okay. I'm okay with that. With that being said, I know it's not on the agenda, but for those of you that have been with us, we have been pushing an old business question of, do we have any legislative tasks to bring forth? And the board, although we don't have a committee, we have some designated representation. So with that, Ms. Alvarez, do you have any specifics that you would like to bring up on the legislative tasks, since I know this has been...
Not at this time, because I have not spoken to the other potential reps.
Perfect. So if you don't mind, can I introduce?
Yes,
Ms.
Ms.
Melwani, do you have any that you have at the forefront of your mind? I should say that.
I'm sure they're on your list too, so let's just go for it.
We'll go for it. So for those of us on the board and Dr. Posse know that Dr. Posse did send a letter from NISCUS, I think it was, that was giving a call to action, and they had pre-drafted a letter that of course we could send out. And really what it is talking about Title I, Title II, and Title III funding, which is not always fully funded, as well as now seems to be potentially experiencing a potential greater reduction and potential elimination of other programs. So I would say that if this was something that we wanted to, as a board, send a letter on, they do have a language there that we could also encourage our constituency on, and that, you know, this would be something that the members of that committee, or that group, would like to talk about. We could add that to the list if we all feel that that's something we want to do. Yeah, feel?
Yep.
Okay. I will also then go into some other highlighted points that are the overarching National School Board Association has a list of about 6 items. Again, also they have created letters that your school districts can use. And those topics deal with fully funding and modernizing the IDEA Act, right, that was Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Expanding, strengthening, and retaining the educator workforce. That is a global problem, is that people are not becoming educators. We have been very lucky, knock on wood, in Port Washington. We have not seen a teacher shortage or experiencing it. People are lining up to teach here, but I know that is an issue across the country. Also, again, strengthening the investments in the ESEA Title I and CTE funds. Always, that kind of is in alignment with what we were talking about at this point. Promoting digital access and digital literacy and cybersecurity. Again, that's another issue that we've kind of talked about in the past, especially, and we've really focused on it from Port Washington, making sure that digital access is available and free for those that need it the most, or those that need it, period. Cybersecurity, as we know, has been an increased risk for all school districts, and also an increased expense on all school districts. So that would be something that, that promoting it, and especially funding some of it, would be very helpful. The other aspect that they've pointed out is prioritizing student health, wellness, and safety, which I know we as a board have not done a deep dive into, but I know that it has been something that the board has brought up from time to time. So we can do that and look into all that. And then the other hot button of opposing school vouchers in all their forms. I would say the other global issue that's affecting Long Island, but not necessarily Port Washington, is the charter school aspect. And I'm tying that, even though school vouchers are different, I would just say that that has an impact, and that has a great fiscal impact on a lot of our school districts. So those are kind of some other legislative tasks I'm happy to share. If you don't all have that, I'm happy to share with anyone. There's a email that has all of this outlined, has the proposed letters even, and of course, as with everything, We like to always look at those letters if we use them and then adjust them to our needs and scope as well, depending on who we speak to. So I know I vomited a lot of information out there. But how would you like to proceed? I'm pointing to you because, Ms. Alvarez, because you're on one of those designated leaders. And so what would be most helpful for you?
Do you have other ones?
That was this.
So the only thing I'd go back to both of you would be is those, majority of those, not the one that Dr. Posse has forwarded to us, because that's obviously been something that this board already looked at briefly last year, because it was like already in the potentials when we were looking at our title funds. Budget committee asked for like a full review of like all title funds, but obviously a little bit more reality this year. So like putting that one aside, from the other 6 ones that you listed, those tends to be just ones that all associations and all groups kind of have, since I've ever been reading anything, been pushing. And really, you know, like for me specifically, when it comes to, you know, IDEA, and just fully funding, you know, those services and special education costs in general, obviously that's something I've always been looking at, thinking about, but every time it's brought up, it's just one of those like, it's not fully funded, we need it to be fully funded, and almost every single rep has been like, yeah, we need it to be fully funded, but that needle doesn't move. So as much as I want to prioritize that, I asked like the two of you, when you brought this up, was it mainly to focus on title funds, or do we actually want to talk about anything else?
I have to tell you, again, I agree with let me let Ms. Valani speak. I'm sorry, go ahead, Jess.
So I think title funds are the priority.
Yeah.
To me, IDEA continues to be a priority, and we should continue to advocate on that regardless of the history. Right? Among this list, agreed. From a budgetary, so I'm thinking about it in terms of what our role in this committee is for recommending issues for our representatives to take on. For me, student health, wellness, and safety is a priority, and we, from a budgetary perspective, could take a deeper dive into that to understand what that means in Port Washington, where we see our schools and our students underfunded in that respect, and advocate for that from a financial standpoint. Opposing school vouchers in all their forms and charter schools, really important issue on Long Island. From our perspective, in terms of how we prioritize our time, I'm not sure that's, or where we use our political capital, so to speak, I'm not sure that would be the place, right? Like, I would sooner be using political capital to advocate for universal pre-K at the state level once we hear what Governor Hochul's intentions are with that. So from a funding perspective, I think titles, funding, IDEA, student wellness and safety, for me, are the financial priorities.
So I'm going to add, I'll agree 100% with all of that. I'm also going to add something I didn't add. So I have 2 things. Our Nassau-Suffolk School Boards Association is going to be having their legislative priority, both state and federal, dinner on the 22nd. I'm privy to information that they have a long list, as they do every day. Most of these things are on it, as they do every year, that they've created, but they're just finalizing it. It will be finalized this week.
Is that the January 22nd
The
one?
January 22nd
I thought that was specific to the CTE.
It also is going to talk about this stuff at this
The only
dinner.
reason I wasn't going, because I thought it was CTE specific.
Oh, no, I think it's going to be also all the other stuff as well.
Okay.
That's my
Sorry.
understanding. That's okay. No, that's fine. That's fine. But the other thing I will tell you that, again, will affect Long Island and will affect Port Washington, and we talked about it at the very beginning, and I know that it's been quiet, are project labor agreements. It is something that has been quiet, but it has not been as quiet as we think over the past few years, and that does have a significant impact, as well as it is one of those instances where on Long Island, it is taking away the local control of the school board, right? And it is not affecting anyone else in the state. So it isn't, and it is a bit immediate, as they do believe that it is something that will be pushed through in this budget. So I would just say those would, if when talking to your counterparts, and we can bring this up at the big board meeting, because we talked about it here at this meeting, that for the designated representatives, that, you know, some plans should be made on how we would like to go forth. Again, plan can be a letter writing campaign, we've done that before. I mean, I personally am going to DC and advocating on behalf of my other role for Nassau Suffolk, but I always carry Port Washington with me. So we'll be meeting with our representatives there and talking to them specifically in that regard. But we're not talking to everyone, so we can also put some boots on the ground if we feel that's necessary. And I guess we can bring this forth to the board. We can pick the top 3 or 4 or whatever, bring it up to the board, and then you can discuss it with Mr. Smith and Ms. Brooks on maybe the best ways to proceed.
I do think that it being a little bit targeted was a better route last year, especially going into, if it's not gonna just be a letter, because obviously we could do 10 letters for 10 different agenda items, but last year it was in-person meeting, and I think when it was very, you know, focused and we had the items that we actually wanted to bring up, that it was a much better discussion and flow to not go on 10 tangents. I really, so I do want to discuss IDA, but not in this meeting, is what I mean. You know, like, I think that needs its own larger discussion and really of what we want to bring up. If it's like a footnote in whatever if the route that the full board of this group wants to make is have an in-person meeting with our local reps, not just letters, then I think that needs to just have a little bit of a larger discussion. For me personally, I think title funds is the biggest discussion right now that I can see as an urgent discussion, but the project labor agreements, I only briefly heard about it in the fall, I think, when they did the resolutions, and there was like a lot of back and forth, so I didn't know where it landed with Nassau, not with Nassau, with
Where it
NISBA.
landed.
Say again?
Where it landed, period.
Yeah, where it landed.
Remember,
'cause
it only affects Long Island.
Correct.
That's
But
the only place that it affects. There's only school districts and only school districts.
Yes, and where we discussed it was only Long Island schools, so I just wasn't sure where it landed after that. So those two, and then of course I'm gonna go with Ms. Maloney on the wellness. Like, I think that before if we go in the route of meeting with our local reps, I don't know if that should be the timeline, should that be part of it, because we haven't looked at a deeper dive here.
Right, until we do a deeper dive and have
100%.
specific asks, I don't think it's a.
Yeah, I would say that as a committee, we should look at the potential that this committee, this group, does a deeper dive in what we are doing in that sense. Fiscally, and what potentially other districts are doing fiscally, and what other potential grants they are open there, and then that has to be something that we bring to our reps. So that I think is like a separate meeting. So that's where I land on on those items that you guys brought. In the fall originally, I think Ms. Brooks has been also keeping an eye on title funds. I'm gonna assume she's been keeping an eye on the electric bus mandate, but aside from that, I don't know what else she had brought up in the fall. I'm gonna leave it.
Yeah,
I'll leave it to her to bring up at the meeting.
The things that she brought up in the fall have already been resolved at this point, yes, so yes.
Minus title funds, so
Yes,
that would be really the urgent discussion, I think. And obviously, again, I wasn't thinking of the labor agreements, so if that's like an urgent thing, I think those are two big ones to like kind of focus on. That's my opinion on everything that was brought up.
Yeah, and I don't think letters and targeted meetings with reps are mutually exclusive. I think they're
Correct. Yeah.
complementary, right?
Correct.
Like,
Yeah.
we go in with and say, here are the letters, or here's the letter
Yeah.
we wrote, but we'd like to talk about X, and I think
Yeah.
that's
I think,
Typically, we do that's typically what a better.
which happened last year. I think there was like a letter that went, there was something that went.
Every year,
yeah.
there's always a letter,
So-
yes, we use.
a letter and a
So-
meeting.
Yes.
So for me, I haven't seen a letter come out of this district since I've been on this board regarding IDA funds.
Sorry.
Regarding special education in general, and fully funding it. So that would be something for me that I have been thinking about. It just has been kind of depressing at some of these major meetings, these meetings out of Port Washington around those funds, and just the little movement in the last, 50 years for that. So I would 100% would love a letter to come out of this district to show that we're one of the districts waiting to see when that needle moves.
So I'm gonna let Kathy speak in just a second, but just because it's in front of my mind, may I make a suggestion then?
No.
For the meeting on the 20th, because we'd have to bring this to the full
Yeah.
board, we will have these on our agenda. But also, I will look at these letters. I will pull up the letters that have already been drafted, and we have the NISCUS one already, and then there's this other one from NISBA, and maybe if you guys, I'll send them to you both. If anyone wants to play with them a little, again, we have these other representatives that are working on this, but if this is a recommendation from this committee, we can at least give it to the board in advance, and if the board wants to do something, we can turn it over to the 3 people. Again, they're not a committee, but the 3 people we've designated, and maybe that's something they want to carry forward if the board deems that's the right direction. Does that seem
Great.
helpful?
Yep.
Okay, great. Kathy, I know you raised your hand, and I'm sure you have something you'd like to add as well.
Sure, I was just wondering, when you speak about the title funding, what specifically? All title funds, or is it the immigrant?
So Dr. Pausy sent us more recently.
So about the House budget, we'll be slashing Title I funding by about $3.78 billion, which is a 26% reduction, which would,
And that's for like professional development, Title
No,
I?
that's
and
Title
Title I.
Okay.
But it said it would basically eliminate Titles II and III. So we don't know, I don't know the specifics of what else it eliminates, other than it will definitely wipe out a significant portion of Title I funding.
Okay.
It also says, that's that part of it.
There was more.
That's of that letter, yes.
Really, something that affects particularly Port Washington is the E&L population and our change in demographics. And how the formula, and I've heard Title III, which is the immigrant support, that's gonna be cut completely. I think that's something specifically for our representatives that does need to be addressed, because there's not significant funding for our most vulnerable population of the E&L.
Yes.
And there's specific regulations of how the students should be educated who are an immigrant students. So I think that's something, even our neighbors aren't as affected as much as Port Washington.
So a way you could phrase it would be provide current year funding for increased costs related to current and mid-year enrollment, because I think that's the other aspect of ELL learners, right? Because that's the other aspect, is that we report at the beginning of the year, and that's the number they use, but throughout the year, you're constantly getting, and we do have mandates to help to provide certain requirements, and our funding is not matching the real enrollment cycles of it all. So that's an aspect of it to look at.
There's a whole host of other support,
Correct.
like psychological health and wellness and things like that.
Right, so where it stands right now, the Senate bill preserves the funding for Title II and III, is my understanding. And the House version eliminates Title II and III funding and cuts Title I funding.
Now, to Miss Alvarez's point, at least this is where I'm thinking you're going, especially because you're talking about IDEA specifically. Historically, the government said, we're gonna cover 40% of your costs for IDEA related services, and historically they have not, and I think now they're covering 14%, I've heard 17%, and at one point it was 20%, but the number keeps chipping downward. So there's that whole argument that fully funding, even at that first initial commitment, would be lovely, but in addition to that, if you're not gonna fully fund, stop cutting it also, right? We need some increases because we've only had growth in that. And that's one of the aspects that when you look at the enrollment of students that fall under the IDEA, the numbers have only increased while that funding has decreased. Is that what you're referring to specifically?
When it comes to that, yes.
Okay.
But that is not an urgent discussion for me, only because it's been since the end of time. The
Right.
title funds, but yes, that's, when I said fully.
And the PLA is definitely.
So that's where I just say for like the next 2 weeks, that could be like
You could
2 more
always
meetings.
weave, but you can weave that in.
Yeah,
That's a
yes,
statement.
100%.
We've
And
spoken
that
to
kinda
our
happened last
representatives
year in
that
the
way.
meetings, yeah.
We weave in these
Yes.
statements, like, remember all of these things where the numbers keep getting cut and the promises have been made?
I think that the advocacy on title funding determines our timeline on doing this, because there are deadlines, there are votes
That's
happening,
where,
there,
Correct.
right?
it's the
So
urgency
we can
part.
include whatever else we want to in there, but this is our timeline for pursuing this avenue.
And I have it in an email and I asked last year, I still can't find it. We were given the breakdown of the title funds last
We're
year.
gonna review that here
Okay, it's in one,
in the revenue.
revenue sources, that was the third click one I didn't click, okay, perfect. Thank you, I'll just skip ahead now.
Okay, so do we
That's a
have
good
at least, do we have a good framework and plan? We can move on now to we'll move on to the revenue sources? You're good?
Yep.
Are we all good? I think we can tighten anything we need to. Go for it now.
Okay, so this is really to speak about school districts in New York State and the different revenue sources that we have. So school districts, and this is really very basic, some people don't fully understand. School districts operate on a fund-based accounting. So there are 4 main funds. There's a couple more in debt service as well. But if you look at it as different jars that we put our expenditures and revenues in, you have the general fund, which if you look, it's 96.1% of our total sources, right, of our revenue. So that's based on property taxes, state aid, and other revenues. And that's really for the day-to-day expenses of a school district. Then you have the special aid fund, which is kind of what we've been talking about. It encompasses things for extra services and is restricted in what we can use. This is only 2.4% of our total revenue. And that comes from federal government, state grants, and local grants. Then you have the capital fund, which comes from bonds and state aid. That's only like 0.2%. And that's for building repairs and construction. And then you have food service, which Jessica is going to speak about after this. And that comes from federal aid, state aid, and then participation charges. And that's to cover meals. So looking at the general fund, so this large blue, that's property taxes. So you can see a lot of our funding comes from our property taxes, 83.9%. Then we have almost 10% in state aid. We have a little bit of use of facilities. We have pilots, which is also taxes, 3.2, and other community services. So the next page, this is a reflection of last year. It's very small, but if you look at the what the handout has, you'll look at actual versus revenue. And if I could bring, you can see state aid, which is kind of the bottom, our total state aid. We had about 280,000 less than we had budgeted. So the reason that occurs is because at budget time, it's a snapshot of what our demographics and our situation is at that time. So then when the year actually comes about, there's another snapshot and you look at actual. So that's why you could have a difference. One of the things we did last year is we looked at use of facilities and increasing our the rates that we charge. So if you look at use of money, let's see. Sorry, I can't.
It's in the
Rentals, is it
Yeah,
rentals?
rentals.
Is it rentals?
Yes, rentals and no.
No, okay.
In the middle is use of money.
Yes, sale of property. Yes, I'm sorry, it is rentals.
Oh, that,
so
oh, it is
that's
under,
use of
okay.
money. Yeah. So you'll see we were less, we were about 150,000 less than we had
Above it.
budgeted. We had budgeted 400,000, we took in about 250,000. So that's really, we use the facilities differently, and we have a lot of partnerships with different organizations. So that's why it was a little bit under, but.
And that was after changing our fee structure?
Yes, yeah. So, There's also, you have property taxes. You'll see where it's an increase of 1.5. A lot of that is due to interest that came in, which was unexpected.
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
Just some of these bigger items of the variance, so like premium obligations, like just these larger 100+ differences, is just this typical from year to
Yes.
year? So like last year, if you showed us last year's numbers, it's just a similar
It's a
variance?
similar- Yes,
Okay.
yeah, so that premium on obligations, so each year we go out and we do a borrow, we do a TAN. It's a tax anticipation notice. So districts don't receive a lot of funding in the beginning of the year from September to like December. So we borrow money each year, like 20 million, to help with our cash flow.
Yeah.
So the return, the premium is what the bank might say to us, okay, I'm gonna give you 3% interest rate, but I'm gonna give you 500,000 of a premium to offset it. They might have only given us 300, so it's really a wash there. And with the tax, other tax items, you see the payment in lieu of taxes, that came in higher than we thought. That happens because assessments change. Sometimes there's like prior years that they'll catch up and they give us that. So that was the main offset there.
Kathy, can I just add, am I correct in the conversations that we have on premium, on obligations, and anytime we're borrowing money, because we have been so fiscally healthy in building up our reserves, creating, and watching and monitoring everything, we've gotten better
Yes.
interest rates.
Yes.
So that when we do have to go out and borrow, which is inevitable, we've had a better return on our
Yes,
investment
that's
for
right.
that.
The district, we work with a fiscal advisor and we received a MIG 1 rating, which we pay a little extra for this. I think it's like 40,000 to have this rating, but we actually get such a good rating that it saves us probably 200,000 each year. So, and that helps when we go out for the bonds that we did, and it also helps each year when we do the TAN borrow. So,
Can you talk a little bit about excess cost aid for the benefit of the community as well? Just what is that? And-
Sure. So school districts, typically you have a certain amount per student, so it might be like 36,000 for Port Washington. There's certain students where we have to pay extra. So anything above, say that 36,000, that will qualify for excess cost aid. So we might have a student that needs a one-on-one aid, or we might have special services for that student. You would look at those students, our PPS department and the business office, they monitor what's being spent on various students, and we file a stack, it's called, and that generates the excess cost aid. So where you see a slight difference, that could just be because our demographics changed slightly.
And we're looking at stacks right now as our audit internally to see if there's a better way that we can be managing some of, both internally in our process so that it will have a return on this investment as well, or if there's something we can be doing differently. So that's TBD to come, but
Yes, yeah.
I'm tying all the committees together, yes.
Yes. Okay, any questions? Okay. So the next one is the long anticipated special aid fund revenues. So this, you see on the bottom, there's Hearts and Port Washington Ed Foundation. So these are local sources, so we put that there just so everyone would have kind of an idea of how generous these local organizations are. You see that Hearts is 78,000 and the Ed Foundation is 162,000. These are really to enrich the arts programs and also just provide and enhance the educational opportunities for our students in Port. Those have to be spent in a certain manner and they're restricted. So if you look at the top of this chart, you'll see the Title I, A and D, the Title II, and the Title IV funding. You see that they're not, and then below you'll see the Title III, the Title, the immigrant. So these are not a ton of money. You see the safe and drug-free schools are about 20,000. Then you have 84 for the Title II. This is for professional development and recruitment of teachers. Title I, A and D, this is significant for our school, and this is really to support salaries at our title schools, and that's 225,000. And Title III, the English language learners, that's about 68,000, and the immigration is 42,000. And those numbers have slightly increased, the ones for Title III. The ones up above, those have slightly decreased over the last year. And if you look at the IDEA, the 619, that's for pre-K. And then 611, that's for ages 3 through 21. That's a significant amount of funding, that's 1.2 million. But we have seen slight decreases each year. So what happens there is the general fund has to absorb the decreases there, so.
Yeah, go ahead, I'll let you, do you guys have questions on this?
I do.
Okay.
I think so I think that this graph was the same one that we got last year, but we met and discussed it, so I was given more like detail of what this means. So these descriptions are very broad descriptions, but with the timeline, if Title II and Title III were potentially eliminated, that's the second bar in the last two with title funds. So we're talking about around 200,000. If I'm reading that, 210, 230, yeah, roughly.
Yeah.
So I'm running down. So all of that are supplemental programs, right? So the Title II and Title III don't, at this moment, fund staff cost.
That's correct.
It's all PD programs, initiatives that the ENL department has created, some recently in last week's consent agenda even showed some of those programs.
Family
Family game, yeah.
There is a little
the
bit
after
of
school-
staff in terms of like extra pay.
Correct,
Right.
so it is the
Right.
after school and the before school programs that we just saw on that, I think, was some of those programs. So if those cuts were to occur, that's what we're talking about, is programs for the ENL department.
Enhancements for them, like there's cultural nights that they have.
The A-Life program, the
the
summer
one.
enrichment.
Yeah, so the summer enrichment program, so really important programs that the ENL department
Summer
has.
STEM, yep.
And we can't forget the 25-26% potential cut to Title I.
Yeah, that's a second, yeah. So, which that would be my next question. So, as far as the full elimination issue, and the reason I bring it up is, again, if we have the meeting next Tuesday with the full board, it's just, what does this mean, right? What does the elimination mean for Port Washington? These are programs that we can bring up as the discussion. These
Correct.
very important.
And dollars.
Dollar amounts and programs. Dollars only matter if there's something behind what that dollar means.
Yeah.
And we can provide you with specifics, like
That's-
how many
yeah.
teachers
Students.
would it
How many
affect
students are
and-
impacted,
And what enrichments are helping. Because a very important part is bringing the families to the school, helping them to feel more comfortable here. So that's a lot of what the Title III entails.
My biggest concern, sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to add on to that, even in terms of the information that's collected for potentially these meetings or letters, even more important than understanding like the list of programs, services, educational assets that are captured by what would ultimately be like a $250,000 shortfall, are the impacts of those. So I would really love to see the educational
Impact,
impacts of the programs that would go away.
Yeah, and that's what I was about to lead into. So some of our district has done a great job that we've reviewed clubs, for example, like middle school clubs, rec clubs, and the offerings for the entire student body. And I think what Ms. Zarate has done well in the last couple of years is looked at how do we reach the students that she works with to help them with their academic performance. And sometimes it's known that it's in these other programs, right? The before school programs, after school programs, same way that it's really important for certain students to have a theater club and a jazz band. Those are their outlets for whatever they are looking at. But some of these programs that we saw in the consent agenda were really academic based. So I'm very concerned on what those programs are. I love cultural, the family ENL night. I love it. But that's not the item I'm gonna bring to our meeting. If we meet with our legislators, I'm not gonna bring up cultural night. As great of a benefit it is, and I know it's a huge benefit, and I value those, and I think all the buildings do them. I think these academic programs that are part of these fundings are really, really important discussion. My only other question was gonna be on the title funds. Title I was that 224 number. Is that any staff number? I don't recall from.
Those are teaching positions, like reading.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just like what that staff implication, if there is a reduction by 24%, whatever it was listed, what that might entail. That just helps me understand like what we are discussing.
So I think I'm following this up with, my understanding though is with each one of these title grants, we still have mandated requirements that we have to comply with. And the grant is only covering a percentage. What we haven't discussed is how much is coming out of our operating fund, right? To cover and close that gap. Because again, when you're talking to your legislators, you're not just asking for, you want that increase, or at least meet us halfway on that increase, right? Because that's what we need to say, because I'm assuming in some of these jars, as you put it, if we looked at it, the gap is much larger than $42,000. That we are probably spending way more than that out of our operating fund to provide all of these mandated services and other services that are enhancements as well. And that's where.
A lot of these services in the grant are not actually mandated.
Correct.
It's what the general fund is supporting.
It actually can't be mandated, there's supplemental.
Oh, that's true also. But I think but the things that are mandated, we
Yes,
could
it's
be
significant.
seeking, we should be seeking for additional funding for that, and because those numbers continue to creep up, while, it's lovely we have these grants, but they continue to decrease them and then put restrictions on them.
They're a small portion,
Mm-hmm.
kind of what you're saying.
Part of the focus that I was bringing up, I think Jess was bringing up, was like what value these programs do offer is, because I knew right away that the Title II and Title III are not mandated items, like those are,
Right.
those programs that were
So
on
you
the
would rather,
consent.
so I might be in the minority, would you rather focus on that, the two of you?
No, I think everything has to be
Oh, okay,
focused on, I
okay.
think it's a board discussion also, right? It's because what the unfortunate discussion that's gonna occur is if these funds are cut, the next step discussion is obviously whatever is mandated is gonna need to be still supported.
Correct.
The next step question that's gonna be a more difficult discussion is the non-mandated programs,
Right.
is it gonna still be funded by this district?
And
I'm-
or
now
what-
you're in a minority,
No,
is it that- yeah.
no, I'm sorry,
Yes.
I've seen in the past
Or how
where,
will-
or what can be, because remember, the
Correct.
pot is only so big.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
there are going to be winners and losers in certain arenas, so, yes.
So, the same way that some of the items I mentioned, like a theater club and a jazz, these are not mandated services, right? These are programs that this district has decided, for very good reasons, are very important programs to a very large group of students. So that's where I say it's really important that we look at that it's not just this title of it's extra for the ENL department of like offering fluff programs. I think it's really important for us as a board to understand what are these programs, what are the academic values of some of these programs, and what overall for us, as we do look at a whole child, what value they bring to the students that we serve. So that's really where I think it's important, because it's gonna be a big discussion. We have a very diverse board that
Yes.
we just know as much as we can of what programs
So-
we're talking about.
So here's the deal though, if you wanna have a conversation, so we can have this as a conversation with the board. Since we didn't establish a committee from this legislative standpoint, my recommendation would be is that we provide the details, the format, and we are empowering the 3 individuals that we have designated to charge forth with the information. That would be, in my opinion, this, I'm now to action. How can we swiftly, in our short timeline, provide without belaboring a point, right? We don't need to have a 7-hour conversation about this. If the vast majority of the board is in agreement with the information that's laid out, then we need to empower people to go ahead and make it, and here's our facts and our packet, and take it on your way. So.
I would just like full details, just so that it's
And I
not
think at this
half
stage, what you're getting
information.
at is that a school district can fund almost anything if it's determined to be the priority.
Correct.
We are not yet having the prioritization discussion.
Correct.
But this information will be helpful for that if it ultimately goes in that direction, right? Like if this funding does disappear and we have to question, can we fund these programs? Which of these, will these programs remain? What is our prioritization? I think that information will be very helpful, but I don't think we're there yet.
We're not at prioritization
I don't think we're there yet.
at all.
Well, and right now, the task is really to advocate to our representative,
Yes.
so Representative Swazi, to support the Senate bill
Correct.
with respect to making sure that the funding remains intact. Because the House bill eliminates the funding, so there will be some jockeying between the two,
Correct.
as there always is, and we want our representative to be armed with information in terms of how this would impact his constituents.
Yeah.
So I
Just a quick question, do our title funds, because we focused a lot on English language learners, which is important, do our title funds also cover any aspect of CTE or alternative graduation?
Not
I
the
think
title,
So, not title.
No.
Not title, it's not covered under, okay.
So the only additional question then for Dr. Feeney's office was last year, the majority of Title II or Title I PD funding went to iReady. So that was district-wide, that wasn't targeted. So I haven't seen like what those funds for PD are going towards this year. Unless it's going to, I know there's been like updates in the packet, but.
Title II is professional development and
So it's
training.
Title
We can
II.
get- We can get a list of what was funded through Title II for 25-26,
Yeah.
and then we haven't yet
Decided for
for 26-27.
And we can have that information. I will tell you, having been a person who has met with these representatives for a long time, and you came to the meeting.
One.
Yes, but in your one meeting,
Very
they
powerful.
don't want to, they're not sitting there. We can give them our packet, they're doing something with it when we leave the office. It's that when you're in the office, what are your points, and really being concise and clear and advocating for it. So we can put that stuff together, we can work with your office, Kathy, to get that detailed information and have it for the board to understand, and we'll make sure this committee is in agreement what we have, and then have something to present to the board in our recommendation. Is that how I'm hearing it? Okay. And you can correct how it comes together if it's not collected correctly. Does that sound good? Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
So just to be clear, I'm providing the detail of these grants
Yeah.
and what they're covering.
Mhm.
And also the impact, the
Yes.
programmatic impact if they were to go, and the number of staffing.
But we're not focusing on 2 of them at the moment.
She's gonna do
Okay.
all of them, I thought. Okay. Is that okay?
You can, it's just, I think the targeted discussion does not include the IDA 619 and 611.
Oh, I meant the title.
Okay,
Yes.
title funds, yeah,
I
yeah,
thought-
yeah, okay,
yeah.
sorry.
That's okay.
When we said all, those are included in this sheet, so.
Oh, sorry.
Every heart's grant.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
I figured because those were in a different color, we're not talking about them.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So next is really food service revenue. So Jessica's gonna cover this more in more detail. But you can see how the state is about 53% of the budget and federal is 33%. And then we have à la carte, which is just people purchasing like adult purchases.
And this is as of this year with the changes in place, yes?
That's actually last year's.
Oh, last year's.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
So, and just different considerations, We are still working with the BOCES grant writer. We're currently looking at funding for digitizing our records and having scannable records, especially for the DPS office. They have a lot of records that need to be maintained. So we're looking at that. We are also looking at opportunities for ELL learners and literacy, and what programs can we have funded by other sources, and also community engagement with ELL students. I'm also working with PRC to perhaps do a joint grant writing with them. They have a grant writer that I've been speaking with also. Again, advocating for additional funding is something the school is looking at. Sharing services with the other municipalities. We were purchasing salts, and who was that with?
Town of North Hempstead.
And also other school districts. We have Jericho fixes a lot of our buses, they repair our buses. Jess's office is looking at doing bidding, so we can have our own repairs done.
This is on our
closer to here.
owned buses,
Yes,
not on our bus
correct,
services,
right.
yes.
And then also creative use of resources. How can we use our resources to reduce our costs? So while we're looking for additional revenue, we also want to make sure that we're being as efficient as possible.
And that would be, we hear all the time, I'm assuming, when Brian tells us, we're using our in-house staff to do this instead of going out and contracting. I think of the gyms and the repainting of the gyms and things of that nature. That's our creative use of resources that we've seen the most of,
Yes.
correct?
And
Okay.
also our carpenters, instead of sometimes purchasing new furniture, they actually have designed workspaces and they customize everything and the
Yes.
painting and everything.
Sorry, I know it was brought up before, but an in-house mechanic. I'm vaguely remembering, do we have an in-house mechanic?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, HVAC is where we've seen obviously the biggest demand, the biggest need, and then also the biggest ROI on savings. You know, we're
Yes.
doing not only installations of large spaces, the Sousa cafeteria, some the student commons in Schreiber, but we're also able to maintain all the increased HVAC equipment.
And that was only in the last couple of years that we brought that
This
fully on.
3 years ago, we started
yeah.
with one HVAC mechanic, and this
Yeah,
budget
you-
cycle, we added the
The
second.
second
It was
one.
this one, yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
And then we're also trying to see about a mechanic for our vehicles too. But we have, so as people retire, when we look to hire people, we may find somebody with those specialties.
Thank you.
So there was some discussion at the last general meeting about exploring new revenue opportunities, creating revenue opportunities. Would this be the appropriate forum for those kind of creative discussions, or should we pursue an alternate approach, right? Like, is there,
so
I have some ideas.
yes, so in the past, so in the specific conversation that came up and also that was referenced, several years ago, prior to my being on the board, there was a recommendation that we look into really how to utilize our two properties the best, especially when we saw maybe they weren't selling.
Yeah.
Or because that seemed to be the biggest revenue source. Or there were questions of, what if we just get sponsorships and naming rights for all of our fields? That's a way to get a revenue source. I know in this committee, we've talked about other aspects of bringing more CTE services in, would that be a revenue source, et cetera. Yes, this committee can do that. If it seems like it's too tedious a job, we can ask the board to create a subcommittee of that if we wanted to bring in community members, et cetera, and create an adjunct committee of the Budget Facilities Committee that specifically looks for a short period of time onto something like that. So in my response to Ms. Gilliard, we always at the end of the year kind of rehash at budgets and facilities and talk about revenue sources and where we find and the realities of that, and is this something that we want to do? So I think in that May, June time period, we'll have that discussion in more detail, just because, well, I mean, we can have the discussion now if you guys want.
I guess the question is, are we losing time between now and June by not prompting that discussion now, if the solution is going to be to design an adjunct committee, a brainstorming committee to bring recommendations to the
It's your
board.
call. It's our call as a committee.
Because I feel like we can keep doing this every year and discussing it at the end of every year, but we don't necessarily move the needle on
Well,
new ideas.
The discussion is that that's because we've decided that the discussion has landed that for the properties, we really wanna wait and see and hold on to our properties
Right.
and use them for our own
Yes.
creative resources, right? So
Properties aside.
So
think.
then that question become, and here's the other part of it. If we are looking to do a bond, right, maybe some of that is going to come out of that bond discussion, and doing it a little bit closer to those conversations of the bond may be more advantageous, because maybe doing it the year before the bond would be more advantageous, because it would be that brainstorming group looking into those revenue sources that also then could be bringing options to that committee that's formed.
Yeah.
So it's a timing issue, I agree with you.
Timing issue.
At this point today, my vote would be I don't know that it's worthwhile to start it right this second. I'd rather spend the time to organize it if we wanna do it, and find the people that you wanna be on it, and move forward and give them a really clear task. But we're entering into the budget season and don't wanna confuse the matter, so to speak, but I'm one person, that's my opinion, yes.
My opinion is sooner than later. I'm of the opposite opinion, only because, sorry.
That's okay, we're a
Because
committee.
there's always something. Something always has been delaying some of our discussions. And I will say that with title funds, it was brought up last year. We did like a quick review of it. I'm not like placing any sort of like delay on anyone, but we did a quick review of it. We got it, and then that was it. And we didn't have like more discussion of it, and it was because everyone was like, it's a maybe, it's a maybe, it's a maybe, it's not here yet. Well, it's here, now our reps are about to have meetings. So again, I know that, I'm assuming you're talking CTE potentially.
CTE program, like
Yeah.
there are lots of.
So I think that you should bring it up sooner than later, and I think that like next meeting would be most appropriate and not wait until June, because we should, the same way that we carved out some time here, if no other trustee has new business at the next one, it should just,
Yeah.
the
I mean,
discussions should just
It
start to
sounds like
occur.
this is a discussion for the board, and for the board to sort of.
I think
the-
budget
I would come to
first.
budget committee first.
If it's
we
It's
should
new
create,
business here.
we should, here's my recommendation, here's process for you, I'll just
It
quickly.
depends on what it is.
Here's what I'm gonna say is, it sounds to me, it's 2-1, majority rules.
Ha!
Yes. Fantastic, look at this, democracy in action. Okay, so
Finally.
now what should happen is, we should put it on the agenda at the next meeting for budget and facilities.
Yes.
And it should be a discussion where we talk about what is our desire,
Yes.
what is the goal, how do we wanna form it, and how are we presenting it to the board, and what are the, right, and then
Yes.
put that forth. And then at the next board meeting, that recommendation gets made. So let's do the deep dive at the next committee meeting.
If it's something budget specific, I think
It is, revenue is
curriculum-based- Yeah, the CTE discussion, programs, programs, budget implications of programs potentially, but if we're talking about new programming, I think you have to like weigh out which one, yeah.
But wait, are we talking about how to create revenue?
That's what you are discussing.
Well,
So you have multiple parts of what
there are
you're,
multiple parts of it, but I am not raising any specific revenue producing ideas at this time. I think that should be the goal of
The
a
committee,
Yeah.
if that's the direction it goes, right?
Whether they come up with programmatic ideas or financial, right? Like
Correct,
there are
correct,
lots of
correct.
ideas that could come out of a process like that. I don't think it's our job to determine that. I'm trying to understand the process for raising this to the board to determine whether the board
Next meeting.
thinks it's appropriate to develop a committee and what the timeline for that looks like. Because
So
if the
we
board
would
says
make
we
the
wanna do this closer to a bond, then okay, that's the plan.
We would make the recommendation to the board. But the way to move things through, in my opinion, come with your portfolio. Here is the plan, the budget committee has done the deep dive. Remember, this is where we do the work. And the work here is not to create the revenue generators, it's to create the plan for the adjunct committee that is going to go forth.
This is the question we want them to ask. This
Yes.
is our proposed makeup of the committee. This is the timeline for the committee's
Correct.
work.
So we do all that at the next meeting and present it then at the big board meeting.
And
next
we can
board
agree or
meeting.
disagree on aspects of that plan, and the plan can
100%.
change, but I
Correct.
think we need to have that conversation.
Just on a side note, and again, we can discuss it more, whatever meeting that this comes up, but separately, CTE I think is a big curriculum discussion, and I have already brought it up at curriculum, and I'm
But
waiting to see.
we're only talking about the
I know,
financial
separately,
aspect. Okay,
that's why,
Right.
separately.
Yes.
As far as the route and the process, I do think you need to bring it up in multiple discussions of what you might be thinking of. CTE, I'm only talking about CTE, I've asked to be reviewed at curriculum. For the benefit of what is CTE in this district, I think it needs to be discussed at budget as well, but I've already put that in there.
But for the purposes of an adjunct committee, I think this could have facilities aspects, it could have curricular aspects, it could have program aspects, right? It could have all, it could have human resources aspects, right? There are all kinds of things that they can talk about. And I agree, these are conversations that should happen in all of these places to address the different facets of them. But for the purposes of what we're talking about here, it sounds like we need to first lay out a plan and a proposal for what this adjunct committee could accomplish and what we would like them to
From the
accomplish.
perspective of the budget
Of the
and
budget
facilities
facilities
committee.
committee.
And again, if you as a board member can always bring up a new business at a Board of Education meeting if you feel, or committee meeting, right? If we want to pursue at the same time, or we may find through discussions that we need to combine two committees. We've had that happen before in the past.
Just for clarity, what would be the charge of the
I think we're
potential
gonna
adjunct
discuss that at the
committee?
next meeting.
Okay.
Let's
Well, let's put a pin in it.
let's put a pin in it.
Put it in
Yes.
the parking lot and we can
Yes.
put it on the agenda for the
For
next
next
meeting to have a
meeting.
more robust discussion.
Because I think that's a question that could lead us down a long road
Right.
today. We're not prepared to
Yeah.
go down. So that's why I'd like to do that, if that's okay, okay. But that question is at top of mind. Okay. Jessica, thank you for your patience.
problem. So today we're talking about the food service program,
I should was talking about you.
and first we're gonna go over last year's expenses and revenues, 24-25 actual. So for expenditures, the salaries represent the chef's salary. So chef, we had Chef Dwayne for about 2 years, and part of the responsibilities of that person is bringing food awareness to our students and nutrition. So the chef would go into classrooms, into the cafeteria to do demonstrations. The chef would do focus groups at all the schools to speak to the students and find out what's going well, what's not, get an idea of, what they're thinking, and then come back to them after we've implemented changes. So those are some of the things that the chef was doing. The chef also goes into the cafeterias to make sure our food service management company is preparing the meals that are on our menu, that they're following safety and all those types of protocols. So the chef position is a very important position, and make sure that that the food service program is running well. The chef also looks over all of our equipment to make sure that everything is working well, and that we have the right equipment for what we're doing. Equipment purchases, we purchased furniture, we purchased food service equipment, stoves, ranges, grills, stuff like that. Sales tax is our sales tax, management company fees, that's our mark, so that pays for all the food and employees. Surplus food is food that we get from the government. Repairs is repairs to equipment. Contractual is our food service consultant that comes in and does a review of each school and helps us with bid specifications. Supplies were for the demonstrations, and BOCES is for our point of sale. And then revenues, I'm just gonna briefly go over that. Paid is just the paid breakfast and lunches, and everything else is basically self-explanatory. Most of our revenue comes from state and federal sources. Do you have any questions about the actuals from last year? We did spend a little more than we brought in, and that just comes out of the fund balance. So we had a very, very healthy fund balance for years, and for years, the state was saying, you have too much, you have too much, you have too much, so we don't want that to happen again, so we invest in our program. Now, for this year, you're gonna see that our management company fees went up significantly. That's because we're serving many more meals because of the free lunch and breakfast for all. Everything else is pretty much the same as last year, and revenues, you'll see the state revenues went up significantly. Federal also went up, but the state really went up because the state is taking the bigger burden. Any questions about the current year budget? And then we have, again, free meals for all students, and I broke it up into two different circles. One is the community eligibility provision. This is Manor Haven's designation, and this was accomplished by but by having at least 25% of our students directly certified, meaning that they're getting free meals because the state says that they are deserving of free meals. They have SNAP or Medicaid, foster, homeless, something like that. So the federal government takes on the bigger brunt of the reimbursement, and then the other circle is our universal free meals. That's called Provision 2. That's every other school in the district. So the state is taking on the majority of the reimbursement. So it's basically how they're funded. So that's why state went up so much in revenue. And then our participation rates for November of last year to November of this year, you'll see breakfast participation went up 13% district-wide, from 8% to 21%, and lunch participation went up 22%, and that went from 45% to 67%, which is huge increase in participation. And our year-to-date return, the return is just looking at what we're getting reimbursed from the federal government and the state, and subtracting out our food service management company. So in just 3 months, we saw a return of $156,000, which is an increase of $66,000 from that time last year. So that's a huge return. And our bid specifications guarantees us a return of $75,000 for the whole year. So in just 3 months, we doubled that. We're at 156. And then if you look at the next slide, participation by building, you can see the white is the 24 numbers, 2024, and the blue is a 2025. And you can see breakfast on the on the left and lunch on the right, how much participation increased at each building.
But if you look at the elementary schools like Daly, you see how much it increased. 52.7% for breakfast. So what we're trying to do is, what are we doing at Daly that we have such good participation? Because even though we've increased significantly the other buildings, if everybody's getting free meals, we really want to increase. So that's something, that's why we look at this monthly to see where are we, what could we be doing better. We have students even at the high school just excited about getting food. And then the students who normally would have qualified for free and reduced, they're also engaged, and it's really helping with, I think, the food aversion issues. So, yeah, really terrific.
And if you look at the lunch participation, we have 2 buildings that are over 90%. Daly and Guggenheim are both over 90% for lunch, which is amazing. And then next few slides go over our equipment investments. So this year, we're spending about $220,000 in equipment. I would like to do a replacement of the serving line at Weber for about $120,000. We have many units that are down, and we need a new serving line desperately, so we'd like to do that over one of the breaks. Guggenheim, we replaced some furniture there. You have a picture of one of the new tables.
You must be so happy. Yes.
Yeah, they're thrilled at the schools.
The students, I mean, they're just, and the teachers too, and the principals.
In the roundtables with the students, our tables are old and gross, and that's what we would hear in the roundtables, so very exciting now to see this come to fruition. At Guggenheim
It's a
specifically,
whole
yes.
celebration.
Yes.
Yeah, and Sousa also has new furniture from last year's budget. But Weber, we bought a double impinger oven, pizza impinger oven, so that's the oven that the pizza goes in, goes through and cooks. So that's for faster and more pizzas to be able to serve. Manor Haven is a very, very new thing. We had an oven go down. It was gonna cost $4,000 to fix. We were not planning on getting an oven at Manor Haven, but at a cost of $4,000, I asked, what's the cost for a new one? So for $10,000, I can get a double oven installed on Thursday of this week.
That's going from a single to.
11,000,
Single,
sorry.
yes, but it's a single to a
Single to a
double, so
double,
you're
so-
getting twice as, yeah.
Yeah, so we're gonna get much more oven space, but you know, these are the type of things that they come up and we ask the question, how old is it? How many times have we fixed it? You know, what's the cost to replacement of, or the cost to repair? Like, I don't wanna spend $4,000 to fix something that's 40 years old, you know?
And that's the benefit of having our
Our chef.
our assistant.
Well, our
yeah.
chef also, yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
so because they can monitor it, and Dwayne was always working with Brian about those similar things, what
Yeah.
repairs, how old.
He's on top of
things.
everything. And then we used our BOCES grant writer to procure some grants for the food service department, and we received $108,360 in grants. This year, we ordered 5 tilt skillets. We were awarded from the grant 5 tilt skillets, which it's this bottom picture, at almost $17,000 each. And then Weber and Schreiber were getting this temp minder thing. It's probes that go into, 3 schools, yeah. Sorry, 3 schools were getting these probes that go into the different like refrigeration units so that we can monitor the temperatures so that we find out before we have food loss that it's
We
gonna
can
be,
monitor them remotely.
Yeah,
Like, we
remotely,
always
yeah, it's on an
monitor them,
app.
but this'll,
yeah,
Yeah,
so
it's like a meter.
myself, Brian's department and food services will have access to this. So we're meeting with them, I believe it's Thursday, right, Brian?
I think they're installing them on Thursday.
Yeah, they're installing on Thursday. And then the double pizza impinger, $20,000 of it was grant funded.
Great.
And then for next year, we're looking to complete the additional seating at Schreiber. We'd like to get a tilt skillet for Schreiber, a reach-in fridge, complete the temp miner installation for the rest of the district, and possibly get a new serving line for Guggenheim. And that's about $270,000. And the year after, a bunch of small things, but Weber would get furniture, $150,000, so you see the picture of the old furniture there at Weber, and combi oven at Weber, Daily, Guggenheim, new stove for Guggenheim, reach-in fridge for Daily, and Schreiber staff cafeteria will get a warmer. That's $245,000, and then the following year, 2028-29, we'd have $120,000 for furniture at Manor Haven and Salem. That'll get us to a very good place with our kitchen equipment. Obviously, if something fails, you know, we'll look at what it costs to repair us versus buying new. And that's basically it. And there's the last page is a picture of one of Sousa's new tables.
So then Daly's the only elementary school that, I know they're.
Daily has new
They have new furniture,
They
right?
have
I was
new
gonna say, I
furniture,
thought their
yeah.
furniture was
The
new.
balance of the high school, the balance of Guggenheim and Manor Haven and Salem are the
And
only
all the
schools that
ones,
do not
okay.
have new furniture.
Perfect.
Weber.
and so doing this long-range planning is really, you can see it's not just being reactive to things, we're being proactive, and we're looking at how can we better serve all of our students with purchasing and being proactive. And this is all out of cafeteria funds, it's not from the general fund, which is, and also grants that we come.
Do you all have any questions on this? Okay. Ms. Mawani, you wanna start?
Sure. Thank you. This is my favorite presentation of the year. I love talking about lunch. first question is, are we planning to reapply for the CEP for Manor Haven and?
It's a 3-year program.
So we.
Automatic.
Right,
It's
it's automatic re-
But
I was,
if
right.
we have, let's say, direct certification at 27%, we can reapply, so it extends it one more
yeah,
year.
exactly, right, that's what I was wondering.
So we
if we're
monitor
exploring that. Okay, so we're monitoring that, and are we continuing to monitor the other buildings as well to see if we
Yeah,
can
but they're
split it,
nowhere
if they're not
close.
close, okay. The proposed expenditures over the next few years, from lunch fund balance, those are exclusive of any potential grants? Grants are considered kind of gravy, or do those include things?
Grants are gravy, so like the grants with the state, it's basically about 20,000 per building. So if we have a piece of equipment for like Schreiber, that tilt skillet, that's 24,000, we would definitely apply for that, and then we'd pay 4,000 out of the school lunch fund if we got the 20,000.
Got it.
So we would go for any of the big ticket items that are coming up over the years, like Guggenheim, if we're gonna be doing the serving line, we'd put in for that, get the 20,000 and pay the difference out of the school lunch fund.
Right, so if we're looking at roughly $140,000 in grants annually.
Potentially.
If we were to
If we
secure
have
it.
things that expensive to.
Then that would bring
I just want to clarify
down-
too, those grants, they don't like to give it year after year to the
Oh, they're
same
not.
school.
Okay.
They want other, so if you've received it within the last year or so, it may be more difficult.
To get it.
So they would give it to another school that has never applied for it
Got
before, and we had never.
Okay, so those are not
applied for this
reliable sources of any
No.
Every
funding?
year, but we will continue to.
But there may be other grants that we have not been awarded under the same heading,
Right.
right? That we would apply through and we may get, but yes.
And then one of the other things, we had students come to the board meeting talking about
Dishwashers.
Right, dishwashers and stuff, so
Yeah.
that's something we're looking into. Could we receive funding for that initiative? Because there are organizations who wanna fund green initiatives, so that's another area that will be considered.
Great.
However, each building is structured differently,
Yes.
right? So we have to
We would
take
want to do a
facility
pilot.
and spacing.
Facilities.
Yes. I just like to put a little asterisk on everything so that we, understand, yes.
But we are looking into it, we don't know how
Yes.
viable.
This is a very specific question, but maybe for Brian as well. Are cafeteria window treatments covered under lunch fund balance, or is it only seating and furnishings?
We have, I know exactly what you're asking about, and we have explored just about every avenue to pay for those window treatments and.
Or even
we have
the
not,
film and the.
The security film is something we've also applied for grants for, but as far as curtains, we have not found a funding source to date. We believe they were initially funded by the HSA. We've discussed removal, we have discussed alternatives, but curtains have to be fire rated, which is what makes them cost prohibitive to replace, especially when they're not necessary, right? So we know that they impact the aesthetic of the space. We know that there's some functionality with being able to close the exterior lights for some presentations, but certainly not a priority, and that makes it a tough ask.
Gotcha,
I'd have to ask child nutrition.
okay.
No one's asked me that before. But we did provide, I believe it was Manor Haven with drinking fountains this year.
Yes. Thank you for that. And finally, I was just wondering if our food consultant or if Aramark have started discussing or are anticipating any impacts to school lunch regulations or to school lunch budgets after, given recent HHS guidance
I
on
know
nutrition.
they're looking to, nutrition-wise, the sugar count, make sure
The
that
sugar
is
count,
lower.
the emphasis
The
on
USDA,
protein,
yeah.
the new guidance from the Department of Health and Human Services, are there any impacts that are being considered to school lunch,
Well,
school
it's a-
meals?
I know they're looking to change, well, I don't think there is a requirement right now with the sugar, but they're looking to put one in so that you don't
Yeah.
have such high sugar content. But as they come out, we follow them.
which is
But
thinking about in
financially,
terms
I'm
of
not-
budgetary
Yeah,
implications
budgetary.
of new guidelines, but we're not there yet, okay.
It would just be kids not eating as much.
Not buying cookies à la carte.
The à la carte, yeah.
There are other pieces of
gets
the
us
guidance around,
300K.
full fat dairy and things like that, that could impact budget
sourcing
potentially,
and
or
stuff,
sourcing,
yeah.
yes.
2 questions. I forget the timeline with the chef in-house. Do we currently have a chef?
We do not, Jess and I have interviewed 2 candidates, we have one more that we had to reschedule. So we're hoping soon.
And we're not calling it a chef.
Right.
The assistant school lunch manager,
So we're looking at.
because the job description has changed.
Right.
Because the job description has changed, it's become more fulsome.
So the title is assistant school lunch manager?
Yep.
So who's
It
been,
has been, we just.
It has been, we just called.
so who's been taking on the work of the assistant school lunch manager currently for this year?
Myself, Brian, all of us.
The business department.
And then with these projections for the equipment purchases over the next couple of years, is this the assumption with the revenue being universal free lunch?
Yes.
Okay.
It would have to change if we have a change in funding.
Okay, thank you. Those are-
Great, thank you. I appreciate all of this as well, and I would just ask, can we make sure that all 3 of these, especially this though, is put into the board packet for this week? Just to make sure board members look at it. I think it's important, again, I thank you for laying out that long-term plan. That's something we've been asking for the funding for the food services, but I appreciate the addition of what we've gotten from the BOCES grant writer. Again, it just shows a return on investment and a priority that we had made as a board to do that as well. So thank you, Jessica, for putting all that together.
And I can't wait to hear what Daily is doing to drive participation.
Okay, our last presentation, I'll try to kind of go through quickly, I know we're a little bit over. But we wanted to provide an update on transportation, the department. You know that we did switch to a new contractor this year. Just some brief facts, transportation represents 11.2 million of our budget, which is about 5.7%. We are the 7th geographical school district with 21 square miles in size. We contract with Huntington Coach / Beacon Mobility for our main contract and 2 private school runs. And then Dell Transportation and First Student, they have the majority of all of our private and parochial runs. So we have the new partnership with Huntington Coach, which began in July of this year. We had about 14 drivers transition from our former contractor to Huntington Coach. We have seen a lot of improvements in parent communication. The transportation office has had a lot of efficiencies due to this Beacon Connect tool. Also, we're monitoring ridership on buses. We do have a couple of routes that are very well attended, so there's a lot of students on those buses. We've seen some behavior management issues on some of our buses too. It's something consistent. I know some of the principals have noticed issues as well. So we are working with the principals to address concerns. Also, we've reached out to Huntington Coach and Beacon Mobility to make sure the drivers have proper training on how to manage the students.
Sorry, not to interrupt, just a question on that part. I forget if with the stop arm, are there cameras inside the buses now?
Yes, we do, and that's Huntington Coach has their own cameras on there.
And our principals have the option to review any incidents or issues on buses?
So they don't have, like if I was the principal,
Correct, they
I
can't, like,
go
just like
on.
their own camera feeds inside,
So
but requests.
they can make requests, and then what happens is Ms. Mora, she has to contact Huntington Coach and say, can you get me the footage from this specific date? So principals can look at it, but we still need to address the issue with students for, like, we don't want it to be every single day that we're requesting the information either. But yes, it is available.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is the family app. It provides real-time updates for parents about their students' school bus location. It has two-way communication, so that means the transportation office can reach out to parents based on specific bus routes and have real-time notification. We have over 792 parents that have signed up for the app, and they are using it consistently. This tool also helps with communication to the principals. If in the afternoon or in the morning a bus hasn't arrived or it's late, Ms. Mora can actually go in and see in real time where the bus is. She has a map that shows all of that. So we have definitely improved our communication with the principals and getting notifications out to the parents as well. The next slide. So this is really the budget for transportation for contractual costs. So I wanted to kind of show you the different runs we have. We have private parochial, we have special needs, we have in-district, which is all of the students who come to all 7 of our buildings. We have field trips, athletics, BOCES runs, and pre-K. Now, if you notice, everything has basically been increasing until you get to athletics. You'll see from 24-25 to 25-26, we've actually decreased quite a bit. And if you recall, we purchased another big bus. So we have 2 big buses, and they've helped also with field trips as well, but the reason for a significant decrease is we're doing a lot more of that work in-house, which is helping with athletics as well and the responsiveness. And we're actually able to do more field trips for our students because it's during the day. And with 2 buses, you can actually take a grade level. So we are doing quite a bit in transportation to help defray the costs. So this slide really reviews what type of routes we do, and you can see the percentage-wise. You see that in-district is 40.8%, the private runs are 27%, and the special needs are 22%. So this is normal for most schools, that it's about 5.7%. Usually it's around 6 or 7%, the transportation needs. So you can see we have 29 schools that are private and parochial, and special needs schools of 32. That's a lot of routes. So, okay, and then in-house operations. We have 8 drivers, 3 full-time bus matrons. We have 2 dispatchers and the director of transportation. We currently have 2 bigger buses, the 45-passenger bus. We have 4 22-passenger bus and 4 14-passenger bus. So these smaller buses we use for a lot of our parentally placed or for our special needs students. And the bus matrons, we also use that for our special needs students as well. These are the areas where we see significant cost savings because we're doing it in-house. And it allows us to have much better control over the pickup times, the customer service, the communications, and also the route efficiencies. It's really significant. So although it accounts for 1.1% of transportation budget, our in-house operation saves close to $2.8 million annually. So these are the estimated yearly savings for contractual expenditures. So we save about $423,000 in athletic and midday runs. We have some students that go to like job opportunities. So as part of their life skills programs, we are able to transport them. Special needs runs, we save about $465,000. Our private placement runs about $116,000, and the bus attendants about $113,000. So for next year's budget, what we're proposing is purchasing another smaller bus because as our fleet ages, we also need to have a bus that if one goes down or has to be inspected, we need to have another bus to pick up those runs. We're also looking at purchasing an electric vehicle, like a bigger size truck, so that we could transport to private schools, like 3 children at a time. This we think will save quite a bit of money. The challenge has been finding a vehicle that's electric and can transport 3 students, so it's still a challenge, but that is something we're looking at and considering. And so, we had the zero emissions vehicle mandate. This is really just a quick review of that. You've seen this all before, but by 2027, all new school bus purchases need to be zero emissions. There has been recently information that came out about filing a waiver for this. Schools, I still have to look into it more, but from what I'm hearing, schools are being told not to apply for the waiver too soon because it's only for 2 years. So if you do it now, it could be expired in 2 years. So you want to kind of wait almost a year and then file for the waiver because we don't think it's going to be practical in the very near future. So if we could advance as well. So the school is working with Wendell Energy Engineers, and it's being funded by 75% of NYSERDA funding. So Mr. Graham and Ms. Mora and myself have been working with the engineers to meet certain target areas. So this next slide, this really is the planning goals which you've all seen before. It's to look for zero emissions fleet by 2035 and have a transition. It's really to see how viable it is for the school district to actually go through with that. This last page provides the scope of work, and you can see what has been achieved so far. We've had the kickoff meetings, we've had data collection, they've analyzed our routes, and also done site analysis. They've also provided a conceptual charging strategy. So the next step for Wendell is to meet with PSEG and go over what would the electrical needs actually be, and could PSEG support the district. So this is a very important step in terms of applying for any waivers that might be available in the future. So do you have anything to add?
I think you're
Yeah.
covering.
So we're still in the process. I think they had told us, we met with them the end of December. And they said it's gonna be a couple more months until we have more information to discuss and to share with the Board of Education.
So we don't have a target, is a target date for the final report and presentation in a couple of months, or just more
That's
information?
probably 6 months away.
Okay.
Are there any
I just have one question on Wendell. I know it was mentioned 2 slides ago, but they are, in their final presentation, they are gonna explain options regardless of zero emissions for a fleet location, right? They're gonna give full detailed report on not just, here's the spot, but the infrastructure cost potentially, or is that something?
Some architectural drawings already, we've seen
Okay.
renderings of, there's
Of what the layout would look like.
opportunities.
Okay.
We've seen districts that have done this already, but it was more districts that had a fleet and converted a fleet. You know, we're asking them to dig a little deeper and what does it look like to convert the fleet we have, but also if we expanded the fleet, if we didn't expand the fleet, if we, we're gonna really get a lot of options and a lot of data.
Okay.
And that was an additional, because we said to them, we wanna look at solar canopies, what would that be? We would need a place to actually repair the vehicles and things like that, so they're working on that and where the parking would be of the buses and just
Not
different
only do you need parking
options.
for the buses, you need parking for the drivers.
Drivers,
Not only do you
transportation,
need, you need significant acreage for charging, the requirements for, and again, going back to, other districts that have maintained fleets, what they're finding is these buses, as you've seen a bus yard, I'm sure they're packed
Yeah.
inch to inch. Now with charging, you need substantially more real estate to be able to spread them out and for compliance.
So I'll clarify then, so are they gonna give a detailed report regardless of charging stations, regardless of solar?
No, it's supposed to
Canopies.
have an electric, it's supposed to be moving to electric. They're not gonna say if you just wanna have a yard,
Yeah,
here
I
you
think
go.
our original discussion last year was the potential of yard locations if, for some reason, that these mandates are not gonna go through and everyone's gonna get their waivers extended forever, because you are expanding the fleet.
We'd be able to extrapolate the data from that though, right?
Okay,
We're gonna
that's what I'm
see how much
saying,
the
yeah.
garage is gonna cost.
It's gonna be half of that, cause you won't need the solar, okay.
And you may not have to even pad closer than whatever, I think that was.
Not that we're gonna need a third Wendell or any report for like
I
this
think this
potential.
would give us a really good starting point to
Okay.
then make
Yeah.
decisions.
And the purpose of NYSERDA funding 75% of it is that,
Yeah,
it's
of
the
course.
energy and stuff, so. But an important factor also is they're going to identify the costs for certain upgrades and who's responsible for that cost.
Okay.
So are there certain things that PSEG Long Island would be responsible for, and what would the district be responsible for? Because that's, has a huge impact of digging trenches just to get the available infrastructure to support those loads, which is really a task, if you ask me, so.
Not a question, my question on Wendell was really about timeline, so thank you for clarifying that. With respect to the cost of transportation, it looks like in-district, special needs, the costs have increased. But looking at the numbers, it looks like private and parochial routes have increased by almost 50% over the last 3 years, roughly. I mean, that's a disproportionate increase relative to the increases we're seeing in other areas of transportation. What do we attribute that to?
I would have to look at it closer. I know in the past, we didn't always delineate which was which runs. Like, we kind of had it all lumped together as contractual. So I could look deeper into that to see, we do have some runs that we can't share with other schools, so we
Right.
have been doing more in-house. And we are trying to look at the most efficient way of doing that, so I could look
Okay.
further into it.
I mean, I was
don't have
wondering,
any
like,
more.
has there been a commensurate increase in private school enrollment? Have we
That's what I
seen
took it when
withdrawals
I
to
read it last night. I was like, oh, we just got more kids in private school.
But I don't, maybe not, maybe it's just more kids in different private
I feel
schools that
like
require
schools,
one-off runs.
Yeah, I have not seen more students, it's just different runs. And where in the past, we could put students on a run that goes to different areas.
Right.
Just going up to like Sands Point, you have someone that's furthest away. If we put those students on with other students, they could be on the bus for like an hour and a half. So we do try to do the most efficient, but also keeping in mind the length of time the students are on.
So we do that with our late buses, right? We have
Yes,
Sands
yeah.
Point buses that stop in, Bay Colony, right?
Yes.
On West Shore Road, so
Yes.
they're,
And Ms. Moore works very
Yeah.
hard to make sure it's all as efficient as possible. But I haven't seen a migration of
To-
50% more students going to, yeah.
Well, it was a 10%, you budgeted 10% more. So I think the question is just why did we budget 10% more for this year? Whereas like in district, you didn't budget more, field trips, you didn't budget more, you cut for athletics.
Well, these are the actuals versus budgeted.
Yeah.
Our budget, our actuals could still come in much lower than.
I was
But-
comparing
but we
actuals from
budgeted
2022
for-
to projected
Yeah.
in
Yes.
2026.
So
Yeah.
what happens with transportation a lot, we could have homeless students that we have to transport. We could have students that thought they were going to one school, but now they're going to another school. We have students moved into the district. So where we could have budgeted less, we know for next year, we're still gonna have those routes.
Yeah.
So we have to increase, so it's, the 10% is based on additional routes. And we are trying to build some contingency into the runs, because in the past, it was very tight. So if you had special needs where you had to now have a matron on the bus, or you just had another homeless student, that could be a $200,000 cost. So, it's something we're trying to do, but also use our in-house services to defray those costs. And it could also be a switching of taking some of the special needs runs and doing those in-house. And now you have the private and parochial might be better to do it contractually. So you might see a shift in the costs.
With respect to the electrification and the budgetary implications of that, should the plan stay in effect, right? We know that federal funding for some of the grants associated with these projects has been ceased, withdrawn, whatever you wanna call it. We don't know how the state is going to respond. If we are to purchase another bus within this budget, that under the current plan, regardless of waivers, could still be, fuel combustion, or whatever we wanna call it, like a non-electric bus, correct? But under the current plan, if we were to buy a non-electric bus this year, it would need to be somehow converted over to electric, or are those buses grandfathered in
By 2035.
by 2035?
So you can't purchase electric buses, but I believe by 2035 it does have to be
It does have to be
electric.
converted.
I think this was
So that's
discussed
10
last.
years
Yeah.
away.
It's
Yeah,
in 10
yes.
years, anything we purchase today will have to be replaced with an electric
And
bus.
budget-wise, I think what was discussed, last year was the return annually on that single.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I think that last year's number within that time
Was
frame
still-
was still a savings.
And that was a
To
big bus.
purchase, that was a big one. Well, I don't know if that savings still matters then, if it's a smaller one.
Right.
So I think that'd be the only question, do we get the return on it?
Sometimes it's greater with the smaller ones because you have,
More,
you have matron on
Yeah.
it, or those runs could cost 110,000 for one run, and the bus itself costs 65,000.
Yeah.
Plus the driver.
Yeah.
But within a couple of years, you've paid for the ride.
I think that was last year's discussion that we brought up of just that same concern.
Yeah.
If we make our money back in less than 10 years, it's moot if we have to convert it anyways,
And
or get
that's-
rid of it.
Even
that's
though
kind
there's
of
a
the
question,
challenge for
Get
school
rid of.
districts
Yes.
though, too. That's the challenge for school districts is, do we continue to purchase vehicles because we don't know
Right.
in the future? You know,
Well,
so
and
it's gonna-
do we continue to purchase vehicles, period? Or B, how many vehicles do we purchase if we do get a return over the next 10 years and we are only allowed to purchase non-electric vehicles until next year? So I think there are two sides to the budgetary
And I
question.
think it's something the district was considering, whether it's a mandate or not, to purchase a couple of electric buses. So if we can do that, why not purchase it? It doesn't mean our whole entire fleet is going to be turned over immediately, but if you have one or two buses, you know.
especially if you can take advantage of any grants that exist, which the state would still do exist. Even the
State grants still exist, yeah.
So.
Dr. Posse, did you have a point you wanted to make? Okay. My only question is how have we involved Beacon in any of these conversations from the electrification standpoint, or have we involved them?
We haven't really specifically said with environmental engineers and stuff.
Just because I know they
Yeah.
do provide transportation to a large group of districts within themselves on Long Island. They have to be looking at this as staying in business or not staying in business, and I'd be curious to understand maybe what they're looking at long-term or not long-term. And it might behoove us to have some of those conversations as well, because it would be a cost savings.
We've had conversations with them electrifying their fleet. We
Yes.
have not had conversations with us building and electrifying our own fleet, which,
Right.
you know, would.
Right.
And that we'd like to bring more of it in-house.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right,
They're
right,
watching.
right. 100% understand.
Just, are they under sort of like, are we restricted to not use them come whatever year?
No.
If they are not electric?
They need to provide electric
Yeah.
buses too, and
They're
some,
required,
Yeah.
yes.
no, they're like
So,
private
right,
companies.
So they either do it or they close
Yes.
up shop.
Yeah.
If
Oh.
this stays.
They are.
If this stays, if
So
we,
they're
if,
heavily
if,
looking
yes,
into
They're
if-
very
most likely.
involved in it,
Yes.
and some of the other bus.
Or
And they
advocating
must-
against.
Yes, I would imagine they have advocacy
Yes.
efforts
Oh, I'm
underway.
sure, I'm sure, yes. And that is also, talking about advocacy efforts, that's something we can add to our advocacy effort question as well, is you know, in light of federal funding somewhat disappearing at this point, the fact that it seems like, you know, it's lovely that they continue to give us these waivers and these possibilities, but we're planning for what, right? And how do you know what to do and how can you forecast? So the question, because, you know, just end it until you can get your plans together and start over again. You know, instead, stop delaying. We could go down an advocacy route where we're stronger in our ask if we felt we wanted to do that as well. Anything else from anyone? I'm mindful of the time, but I also know we have constituents here, so I don't know, does anyone have any specific to what we talked about today? Questions, not outside, just because of the time?
Questions. What is for the private and parochial runs, what is the basis for our supporting those? Is that a state mandated?
Yes,
It is.
yes. So those are parents who send their students to
Right,
private.
because they want,
Yes, so
because they
whatever.
want, yeah.
Yes, and they pay taxes. So whatever we provide for our students, we have to provide for
Okay.
privately placed.
And then, for our fleet, for our bus fleet, are the drivers district employees or are they third party?
They're our
contracted?
employees, yes, yeah. So on one of these pages, you'll see the number of drivers we have.
Oh, I see, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
That's it. That's all I have.
Okay, wonderful. I appreciate you guys taking the extra time with us. I am gonna make it very easy. Jean, I forgot to welcome you at the very beginning of the meeting, but welcome. We're so excited you're here with us. And in addition to that, we'll make it very easy. Our agenda for next month, as I understand it, is we are going to discuss the budget. By then, we'll have the state aid runs, hopefully, right? And also, we are going to have this conversation of, we're gonna just call it revenue generators and how to handle. And we all will understand what that is. And so there is the agenda, unless something massive comes up and we can move forward. And we will see everyone on February 9th at 9 a.m. So we look forward to it.